Tell me if you've heard this before. Andy Dalton is a stopgap quarterback, and the guy who's going to replace him will come in when he's ready. At Sports Talk Chicago here with Jon Zaghloul. Make sure you follow us here at Sports Talk Chicago. We put out Bears content daily. We'd love for you to subscribe. Follow us on any podcast platform at Sports Talk Chicago and on social media, Sports Talk Chicago. Want to help out our sponsor, Amish Country Farms? Visit them today in Orland Park and tell them we sent you. So get this. Can't believe I saw this story. Had to share it. Andy Dalton is going to be the starting quarterback, kinda, for the Carolina Panthers in 2023. Here's the tweet from Dov Kleiman. Panthers announced that Andy Dalton is their starter right now, quote, heading into the season, according to GM Scott Fitterer. Fitterer says that first-round overall pick Bryce Young will replace Dalton, quote, when he's ready, and there's no timeline to when that'll happen. 2021 much, Bears fans? Anybody else remember the misery that we all went through with this situation? And that's why I've declared this video a pretty original title, and this is true, and I want to declare this to the mountaintops here, that Carolina Panthers have become the Chicago Bears. Got to clap it up for them. If you guys are at home, clap it up. They've become the Chicago Bears. They have officially become the most dysfunctional organization in the National Football League. Congratulations to Carolina. Now, I know that Bryce Young is going to be a pretty good quarterback, I think, and there were some who argued the Bears should trade Justin Fields and draft Bryce Young 1. And to be honest, I would not have opposed to that. But regardless, here's what happened. And I just find it so interesting that another team is taking the exact same approach the Bears did. And wait a minute, how'd that work out for the Bears, right? Wouldn't you think maybe we shouldn't replicate the mistakes that the Bears made? And I know the Bears are an iconic franchise, but I would not be replicating any mistake that Matt Nagy made or Ryan Pace made. I wouldn't be mirroring their policy when it comes to quarterbacking and leading a team even and trying to stop strife in the locker room. There were so many things that went wrong with Andy Dalton and Justin Fields and Nick Foles and that whole mess that was 2021. And now Carolina says, you know what? We're going to do you guys one better. We're going to do the same thing you did. We're going to put out the same language that you did. We're going to say we don't know when Bryce Young's going to be ready. There is no timetable for his debut. We're going to roll with Andy Dalton. Yes, he's our guy. We're going to roll with him heading into the season. And we don't know when Bryce Young's going to debut. Stop taking your advice from Matt Nagy and Brian Pace and from the Bears. They must be consulting over there or something. How did that work out for Chicago? That's all you got to ask yourself. It's one question. How did that work out for the Bears? Answer's horribly. So naturally, Carolina is going to do the same thing. You could argue that Bryce Young may not be ready yet, but I'd rather see Bryce Young play week 1 than Andy Dalton. I mean, you know what you're going to get. And Andy Dalton actually, surprisingly, had a great year last year. Statistically, had a 95.7 passer rating. He was good. And I like Andy Dalton as a person and as a player, and I root for his success wherever he goes. But this is unfair to everybody involved. It's unfair to Dalton because he's always going to be looking over his shoulder again. It's unfair to Bryce Young because he might be ready, but he won't play right away. And it's unfair to the Panthers themselves because everyone's going to be wondering, who the hell's our quarterback? I laugh from afar. And I enjoy the misery because we had to deal with it here for a whole season. By the way, that was the year that Matt Nagy got fired and Ryan Pace got fired. Anybody else taking notes out there in Carolina? Frank Reich, are you taking notes? A coach just got fired for doing this, but you're going to do it too? And a GM got fired for doing this, and you're going to do it too. Scott Fitterer. So Scott Fitterer and Frank Reich then should officially be on the hot seat. Technically, if they're going to replicate what the Bears did, if we're going to see this play out again. You either go with one or the other and you stick with it. If you firmly believe that Bryce Young is not ready to play NFL football, then guess what? He sits a year, right? He sits. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with sitting for a season and learning. It worked for Patrick Mahomes. It worked for Aaron Rodgers. I have no problem with that. But this whole halfway in, halfway out, I'm riding the fence is just dumb. And they're going to reap the benefits of this decision. The benefits are very few, if any. That's what I don't like about this. I find it funny as a Bears guy, and I'm sure all of us do as well. When you saw this tweet, I'd love to know what your reaction was. You could comment it here. I'm sure all of you were just laughing. I put out a tweet saying, it's happening again, LOL, because it really is. It's happening again to a different team. I just love reading this tweet. Andy Dalton is their starter right now heading into this season. Bryce Young will replace Dalton when he's ready, and there's no timeline as to when that's going to happen. No timeline. Who knows? Could be next week. Could be if Dalton plays poorly. Could be if somebody gets hurt. I mean, just make a decision. This goes back to the Carolina report that came out like 50 days before the draft, if you remember, where they said that they don't know who they're going to take with 50 days to go. They had no idea, apparently. And I don't know if that's true or not, but based on this information, it sounds like it is true. They had no idea who they were going to take. Oh, man. Why do this? I understood why the Bears did it with Fields. I mean, horrible O-line, and we saw that week 1. I mean, we saw Fields get sacked 9 times, and I will still say that maybe he should have sat that whole year, especially learning under a head coach that ended up getting fired. At the end of the day, it probably would have been more beneficial for Fields to sit for a whole season. But in Bryce Young's case, why not play? I mean, you're a seasoned quarterback from Alabama. You're the first overall pick. Why not play him? And if you're not going to play him, fine, but then commit to sitting him and don't just kind of say wink, wink, nudge, nudge, he's sitting. Because it's dumb. It confuses everybody, including your own players in your locker room, and it forces Andy Dalton to probably, I would say, be more conservative in his play. He's going to be worried, if I throw 3 picks in a game, am I going to get benched? If I fumble the football twice, am I going to be benched? Everything he's going to do is, am I going to be benched? Instead of, hey, how can I win my team football games? No matter how you slice it, it's a dumb move, and nobody wins from it, including Bryce Young, who I would be most concerned about. But yet, Carolina is going to go back to the old Bears playbook, and that's when you know that they're screwed. Going back to the good old Bears playbook is not going to win you anything. It hasn't won the Bears anything for frickin' 40 years, so I don't know how it's going to win Carolina anything, but I digress. They know more than me. I'm just sitting here in my studio talking about why it didn't work here in Chicago, and we all saw it firsthand. You don't have to be a scout or even a media member on the field to know it didn't frickin' work. But Carolina would rather go that route instead. I wish him all the best, and I hope Andy Dalton kills it. Maybe Andy Dalton does so well that they bench him despite him doing well. Then we have a full quarterback controversy on our hands, and that'd be fun to watch. But at the end of the day, this one makes no sense, and I have to say I'm scratching my head. But one thing's for certain. One thing I know deep down in my heart, and I can say it now, the Carolina Panthers have become the Chicago Bears, and that is not a compliment. Thanks for watching today's show here on Sports Talk Chicago. Appreciate all of you tuning in. If you like this video, subscribe to the channel. We do Bears videos daily. We have some great stuff here, and we would really appreciate a subscription. Follow us all over at Sports Talk Chicago podcast, at Sports Talk Chicago. Big thank you to John Meadows, directing and producing. Support our sponsor, Amish Country Farms, for the best Amish food in all of Chicagoland. Hit them up today in Orland Park. So long, everyone.